what does data sovereignty actually mean?
Data sovereignty actually means having full and total control of your data, knowing where it lives, where it resides, and where it flows through. If any data flows through an American server and or network, the U.S. government can tap into it to use it for national defense.
And you're talking about hallucinations is an important issue.
Deloitte is being taken to court by the Australian government, the New Zealand government, Canadian government, and Indian government because documentation and research reports that they did were done with hallucinated data. 42% of business leaders in the United States have made major corporate decisions based on hallucinated data.
Welcome to the Regulating AI podcast, where we bring leaders to discuss how to frame good AI policy and AI governance worldwide. I'm at the Emerge America conference and we are at the convention center here in Miami. We are live here. I have Luis here with me to discuss about data sovereignty, about US-Canada data, and several other key topics that are on the mind of a lot of people. Luis, welcome to the Regulating AI podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Luis, we have a global audience of policy leaders, leaders in AI ethics, governance. We have people who run AI companies and just are obviously very curious of what is happening. From a data sovereignty standpoint, firstly explain very shortly and succinctly to our audience, what does data sovereignty actually mean?
So data sovereignty actually means having full and total control of your data, knowing where it lives, where it resides, and where it flows through. And that's something where a lot of people get disconnected on, and particularly because I'm imagining your audience is mostly based in the US. But data sovereignty has become a bigger question in regulated markets, markets where they have privileged data, but also international markets. So there is the AI Cloud Compute Act, but before that, there was the Patriot Act, which regulated that if any data flows through an American server and or network, the U.S. government can tap into it to use it for national defense. That immediately created these policy restrictions in countries like Canada, Europe, Middle East, Asia, to make sure that data does not flow through U.S. servers. And that's kind of where, I'm oversimplifying it, but that's kind of where the basis of data sovereignty comes in. Because if you're a Canadian company or a Canadian municipality or province or government, you want to make sure that your data resides in Canada and does not flow through U.S. networks so that you are not at all subject to the Patriot Act. Let's move forward to AI. And now we've increased the capacity of processing power. This now becomes a lot more of an important equation because people want to make sure that not only their data is not used in the public, but also that they maintain at all levels ownership, auditability, and traceability of their data. And that's where the equation, the conversation is right now. And it's not so much of a big conversation in the US because we own the servers, we own the data farms, but everywhere else, it very much is. And so now that government we work a lot in the SLED level, so state, local government, counties, municipalities, etc., they're starting to realize that data sovereignty is not just an international subject, but it's a matter of how do they own their data, where does it reside, and obviously managing that without the Department of War budgets that the federal government has.
So, Luis, we have a global audience. What, if I may simplify it, and I could be wrong too, what you're saying is the data for some of these countries could be in a data center, let's say in the US, and that obviously is not data sovereignty. It should be in a data center in where they have control, they have auditability, traceability, and control. Every country, small countries, maybe not have data centers. Look at the Caribbean or some of these other countries, Pacific Islands, or even small countries, there are state countries, etc. What should these countries do for data sovereignty then?
So there's a couple of options. I mean, today actually here at the conference, I met a data center that's based in the islands, and they're trying to do sort of a consortium of data centers so that they can gain sovereignty as a Caribbean region. I imagine, and they're called CARICOM if my memory serves me right. And so the reality is data sovereignty will impact different organizations differently. If it's an organization that cannot have their data in the US for whatever reason, then they should probably be looking at organizations that house their data in South America, in other islands, or on premise, which is the next big conversation. And a lot of organizations are starting to shift to on premise because compute power is basically getting out of control in terms of costs, in terms of availability for future contracts. And that's kind of raising the wall of how to enter the market of cloud and AI a lot. It's really pushing out mid-market out of the equation.
So, Luis, just again, a little bit more simplification. We saw certain regions come up when they were trying to create financial centers, etc. Do you think there will be some regions, countries that will say, hey, house your data here? We will give you all the protection. It'll be like you're having your sovereignty, etc. Like you saw financial hubs come in, whether it is in Luxembourg or stuff like that. Do you see data hubs coming across that could serve smaller countries or regions that want to protect, but they don't have the resources to do that?
Oh, absolutely. It's imminent. I mean, it's already happening in certain markets, and certain markets that can afford it are trying to build their small data centers. I was actually just in France a couple of weeks ago, and we were able to tour some of their data centers all the way from Marseille to Cannes and Nice, Sophie Antipolis in Nice, and I don't remember the data center in Marseille, but it served a really, really interesting purpose because it serves as a splice center. So that's basically when two cables connect, but they connect Europe with Northern Africa with North America. And in these data centers, you have these areas that are super closed off, even to local staff. And you walk in and it looks like a mini Fort Knox. And that's because organizations really need to maintain their data, not just protected, but also sovereign from local staff as well as internet web staff. And so what you're saying is a reality already where there's certain areas and hubs which are popping up left, right, and center saying, hey, we can provide you this access to data sovereignty because you will have full access and control of your data.
So the future really is in controlling your data. Luis, let's shift to AI ethics, which is also in something that you are very, very familiar with. Companies, a lot of companies, and we talk to a lot of them all the time. When they are setting up AI standards and others, either have an AI ethics board or a governance board and things of that nature to make sure internally policies are laid out in terms of the use of AI, in terms of protecting whether it's in transparency, privacy, bias, and those kinds of things. If you were to advise companies, etc., who are listening to you, are those mechanisms enough, or what concerns you about AI ethics when you look at enterprise application of AI?
I think that I approach it from a different angle. My concern is privileged data leaving the organization. And a lot of organizations, be it government or enterprise, are dragging their feet for a number of reasons. It could be founded or not. There's a recent research, and I think it was Gardner that came out with it, but it says that 67% of enterprise leaders are reluctant to bring in AI enterprise-wide because of privacy and data sovereignty concerns. This in itself talks to the challenge of not empowering your employees with AI. So what do? They go to ChatGPT, Anthropic, whatever their choice is, on their own time. And so who monitors and polices what they're providing to these models? So now you're running the risk of, not having sanitized data go out into these public frontier LLMs. So that in itself is a very big challenge for organizations because you're now having to police the individual output of members of your staff if you're not empowering them with an enterprise-wide AI. And so at that point, you now say, okay, if we're going to empower them, how do we empower them? Do we empower them with a closed loop AI, which means it's only taking information from their documentation and their resources, or do we provide an API connection to Anthropic or Claude or ChatGPT? That immediately brings me back to a case that's happened very recently for the last couple of months where Deloitte is being taken to court by the Australian government, the New Zealand government, Canadian government, and Indian government because documentation and research reports that they did were done with hallucinated data. And we're talking an established organization like Deloitte who has an internal AI system, but they didn't have the guardrails necessary for that. So there's a challenge at every step of the staircase. And so the policy has to be ensuring that the outputs of your staff are in line with your content. This is why I'm a number one fan and proponent and ambassador of closed loop technology, similar to what we do at Offerio, because the challenge is when AI uses information that's not an enterprise's information, you're contaminating your data. AI has no obligation to provide fact. Its only obligation is to algorithmically and to be able to please your request. And this is when we start seeing hallucination of content. And that is the number one challenge. I think there was another report that came out that said about 42% of business leaders in the United States have made major corporate decisions based on hallucinated data. That's a huge problem. That's a massive problem. So my concern is enterprise-wide, and you cannot regulate one without regulating the other, and you cannot structure one without structuring the other. And I think that if we try to piecemeal it, we're doing a disservice to the whole entity because you're preventing one side or the other to be successful at what they do.
So, Luis, for our audience, you touched on two very important points, and Luis is watching his watch, so we have to be mindful of that. But he touched on shadow AI. But I think, Luis, you're saying that engagement by employees in using AI still is a good thing as long as there's closed loop AI. That's one of the things that you're talking about. And you talking about hallucinations is an important issue. Day before, there was news that Sullivan and Cromwell, which is one of the top legal firms in this country, they submitted legal briefs which had hallucination, and there's a issue pending with them. So that's absolutely an important thing. Luis, I did a disservice to you in the beginning. I should have asked you to just give a little bit about your background and why you have the amazing expertise that you have for our audience before we let you go from here.
No, thank you so much for the opportunity. So my name is Luis Antonio Diaz. I am the founder and CEO of OfferioAI as well as Blue AI Technologies. My background in closed loop data sovereignty stems from my past work in government as well as in the space of AI. I'm a visiting lecturer at McGill University up in Canada and one of the founding members of the Canadian cluster for data sovereignty. So my work is really in ensuring that, all our outputs are ethical AI, which is data sovereign and closed loop, so that we can 10x, users to embrace the reality and the dream of AI, not just to be sort of challenged by what they believe to be the nightmares. And I think that AI is a beautiful thing when used properly, when leveraged properly, with human in the loop AI.
So human in the loop AI, and Luis now has a human in the loop to meet for a client, so we'll let him go. But Luis, thank you so much for your insight on data sovereignty. I think this was extremely important for our audience, so appreciate it.
My
Thank
pleasure.
You so
Thank
much.
you much for having me.
Thank you, Luis.